Get your jacks trigger, have a little laugh, nigger. If you can't cotton pick, then I won't let you suck my dick. My name's Jax, boy, pick me cotton black, boy. Now don't get punchy or I'll send you to your country.
I find it funny that you believe I didn't study the Bible and find contradictions myself, so let me just state some of my pet peeves with the Bible. Let's begin with Moses and Pharaoh. In the Old Testament, many innocent people in Egypt were killed by upwards of 6 different plagues that God had sent down due to Pharaoh refusing to listen to the demands of himself through Moses. Yet it's revealed that Pharaoh did not deny any of these due to his own volition, but much rather that Jehovah God himself purposefully continued to harden Pharaoh's heart just so he could showcase his power. It states, "Go to Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart and the heart of the officials, in order that I may show these signs of mine among them." End quote. Essentially, Jehovah God is using both Pharaoh and Moses as his own puppets so he could have an excuse to showcase what he's capable of, instead of doing the logical thing with his omnipotence, however that word is spelled, to soften it or maybe speak to Pharaoh. One of the plagues even has Jehovah God kill all Egyptian firstborn children. Innocent men, innocent children, and even innocent infants who have done nothing wrong to him or anybody in particular because he wanted a pretext for how great and deadly his power is. Jehovah God literally took away the free will of the Pharaoh so he could punish Egypt, which is stated in the fucking Bible itself, and we're meant to believe Pharaoh's a terrible human being as a result of what he could no longer control. Yeah, okay. Makes perfect sense to a moron. On the topic of free will, Romans 9 verse 16-23 states in direct quote, "It is not, therefore, depend on human desire or effort, but God's mercy. For scripture says to Pharaoh, I raised you up for this very purpose, that I might display my power in you, and that my name might be proclaimed in all the earth," lowercase for some reason in the texts of the Bible, which I find stupid, but whatever. Therefore God has mercy on whom he wants to have mercy, and hardens whom he wants to harden. One of you will say to me, then why does God still blame us? For who is able to resist his will? But who are you, a human being, to talk back to God? Shall what is formed say to the one who formed it, why did you make me like this? Does not the potter have the right to make out of the same lump of clay some pottery for special purposes and some for common use? What if God, although choosing to show his wrath and make his power known, bore with great patience the objects of his wrath prepared for destruction? What if he did this to make the riches of his glory known to the objects of his mercy, whom he prepared in advance for glory? This verse here is seriously fucked up because it showcases a few things. The first is that free will doesn't actually exist, it is just an illusion from God, and we are literally his puppets. Secondly, that no amount of good a person does will guarantee a spot in heaven, or even a spot in the afterlife, eternal life. Third is that Jehovah God has literally had some people be born just so he can make them evil for his own justification of torturing them, so those he made righteous would be grateful they don't endure endless torment, as those he literally created to torture because justice, I guess. You see where it's starting to become just a little tribalistic? This one I'm going to type as it is, because this one I find absolutely hilarious. Ableism by Jehovah God is something I wasn't expecting when I was younger, but we've got it right here. Leviticus 21 verse 16-23 reads, and I quote in full, "The Lord said to Moses, say to Aaron, for the generations to come none of your descendants who has a defect may come near to offer the food of his God. No man who has any defect may come near, no man who is lame or lame, disfigured or deformed, no man with a crippled foot or hand, or who is a hunchback or a dwarf, or who has any eye defect, or who is festering or running sores or damaged testicles. No descendant of Aaron the priest who has any defect is to come near to present the food offerings to the Lord. He has a defect. He must not come near to offer food of his God. He may eat the most holy food of his God, as well as the holy food. Yet because of his defect, he must not go near the curtain or approach the altar, and so desecrate my sanctuary. I am the Lord, who makes them holy." Now, granted this is only to Aaron and his descendants, but it still holds true with the ableism. Also, why damaged testicles was included in the scripture, I have absolutely no fucking clue. But it's in there. Imagine God was real and you had cancer, and he just shuns you away because you have what he considers to be a defect. You may still live and survive, but don't you dare go near a church. Again, masterful insight by our quote-unquote one true God. To continue this absolute train wreck of examples, I have God hates immigrant children. Something that they have absolutely no control over because nobody chooses who their parents are in any circumstance ever. Sadly, unlike the other scripture, I do not recall exactly where this is in the Bible off the top of my head, but I'll share something fun I do recall. Deuteronomy 23 verse 2 states, and I fucking quote, "No one born of a forbidden marriage, nor any of their descendants may enter assembly of the Lord, not even in the 10th generation." That means even if you worship Jehovah God, devote your life to him, do only good actions for at least 10 generations, he will view yourself and your descendants as scum. Deuteronomy 22 verse 28-30 is exceptionally disgusting because it states that any woman who is raped, she must remain married to the man for the rest of her life, and all the man who forced himself onto her non-consensually needs to do is pay 50 shekels of silver to the father. On the same note, if an unmarried woman has intercourse, consensually or non-consensually, before marriage, then she is to be stoned to death at the doorstep of her father. The Bible literally says this, and to take it one step further in Deuteronomy, it is stated that a woman who is not a virgin on her wedding night is not only to be killed, but only after her father violates her with a rag. Even more on the subjugation of women that men totally didn't write in God's name to try and justify their disgusting actions is from 1 Timothy 2 verse 12. I do not permit a woman to teach or to assume authority over a man. She must be quiet. And there are plenty of other Bible verses out there that lower women to simply be the silent property of men who are allowed to have absolutely no say in society or to so much as speak their minds. Being the daughter of a priest was even worse, because if she were to ever have intercourse, she was to be burned to death, as it's stated in the book of Leviticus. Look it up. Moreover, a woman could be sold as a sex slave, as it's approved by Jehovah God in Exodus 21 verse 7-8, just as an extra tidbit of information for those who for some reason still believe him to be the pinnacle of goodness and morality, rather than being written in a more turbalistic point in time by storytellers. Final thing I'll say on this point is that all women have periods. It's unavoidable, so why would God in the book of Leviticus make everything a woman touched when on her period be seen as unclean and have her forced to make an offering to be forgiven for being unclean simply due to her period? This is real. It's again in the book of Leviticus. On the 8th day of a period, the women in the Bible were forced to make offerings and in some cases beg for forgiveness for having a period. Nobody can control their menstrual cycle, so to be shamed for it is literally appalling. Let us not forget Jehovah God endorsing slavery in Leviticus 25 verse 44-26 on top of that, alongside Ephesians 6:5. Moreover, may we go to Exodus 21 verse 20-21 where God says, and I fucking quote, "Anyone who beats their male or female slave with a rod must be punished if the slave dies as a direct result, but they are not to be punished if the slave recovers after a day or two, since the slave is their property." That is extremely fucked up as well, when you consider that God would send his people to outward cities in the quote-unquote name of peace. If that peace was accepted, then all in the city were to become slaves of Jehovah's people, and if they rejected the idea of being slaves, then the men would be murdered alongside male children and male infants. The women and female children were taken for quote-unquote plunder. In other words, to be raped and married by those who just slaughtered everybody they ever knew and loved. Jehovah's version of mercy is far too fucked up for myself to even pretend to understand it in the slightest. Numbers 37:7-18 expands on this as well, since the Bible says to do this more than once, and it reads, and I quote, "They fought against Midian, as the Lord commanded Moses, and killed every man. Among their victims were Evi, Rechem, Zur, Hur, and Reba, the 5 kings of Midian. They also killed Balaam son of Beer with the sword. The Israelites captured the Midianite women and children and took all the Midianite herds, flocks, and goods as plunder. They burned all the towns where the Midianites had settled, as well as their camps. They took all the plunder and spoils, including the people and animals, and brought the captives, spoils, and plunder to Moses and Eleazar the priest, and the Israelite assembly at their camp on the plains of Moab, by the Jordan across from Jericho. Moses, Eleazar the priest, and all the leaders of the community went to meet them outside the camp. Moses was angry with the officers of the army, the commander of thousands and commanders of hundreds, who returned from the battle. "Have you allowed the women to live?" he asked them. They were the ones who followed Balaam's advice and entices the Israelites to be unfaithful to the Lord in the Peor incident, so that a plague struck the Lord's people. "Now kill all the boys, and kill every woman who has slept with a man, but save yourselves for every girl who has never slept with a man." This is barbaric and tribalistic views and standards set by the all-loving, all-knowing, all-powerful God. Kill the man, rape the women. To delve a little deeper on a past point with how Jehovah God views slavery, because I glossed over this when typing, let's look at Colossians 3 verse 22-24 where it says, "Slaves, obey your earthly masters in everything, and do it, not only when their eye is on you to curry their favor, but with sincerity of heart and reverence for the Lord. Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord, not for human masters, since you know that you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. It is the Lord Christ you are serving." Ephesians 6 verse 5. "Slaves, obey your earthly masters with respect and fear, and with sincerity of heart, just as you would obey Christ." Which really stands out considering God on multiple occasions says to only obey him, not humans. But whatever, I guess. Consistency. And 1 Peter 2 verse 18. "Slaves, in reverent fear of God submit yourselves to your masters, not only to those who are good and considerate, but also to those who are harsh." Proverbs 23 verse 13-14 says to beat your child with a rod, while stating later in Exodus 21 verse 15 that any child who hits their parents or so much as curses them is to be put to death. A child. A literal fucking child. Meaning that God is all for beating your children with a literal weapon, but if the child fights back in self-defense, they are to be executed. Tell me again, who didn't study the Bible, lady? Tell me. 'Cause I think it's you. Expanding on this, Deuteronomy 21 verse 18-22-30 teaches that disobedient children who do not listen will be taken to the elders and killed by men of whichever town they live in. A child whose brain is not fully formed ANF functional, who has yet to have their frontal cortex developed, is to just be slaughtered for not obeying every command given to them. Yeah, that seems like something righteous, and just God would allow. The next one I should hope doesn't need much of an explanation. It comes from Psalms 137 verse 9, and it says, "Happy is the one who seizes your infants and dashes them against the rocks." I understand the psalmist was going through some hardships, but holy fuck is that ever morbid. Continuing this topic of Jehovah God giving absolutely no fucks about the lives of literal children who have yet to do any criminal wrongdoings. Let's read Leviticus 26 verse 25-29 where it says, "And I will bring the sword on you to avenge the breaking of the covenant. When you withdraw into your cities, I will send a plague among you, and you will be given into enemy hands. When I cut off your supply of bread, 10 women will be able to bake you bread in one oven, and they will dole out the bread by weight. You will eat, but you will not be satisfied. If in spite of this you still do not listen to me but continue to be hostile toward me, then in my anger I will be hostile toward you, and I myself will punish you for your sins 7 times over. You will eat the flesh of your sons and the flesh of your daughters." One of the literal punishments in the Bible is that a man must eat his own children's flesh. Forcing cannibalism on somebody is beyond any punishment that should ever be set. This here alone shows myself that the God of the Bible, known as Jehovah, is a fucking psychopath. I wonder why verses like this were never spoken of at the Kingdom Hall, and why whenever I questioned the Bible they all hated it. Kind of glad these days I was always the black sheep who asked the hard questions, even if it meant I wasn't overly liked by everybody. 2 Kings 8 verse 12 says, "Why is my Lord weeping?" asked Hazael. "Because I know the harm you will do to the Israelites," he answered. "You will set fire to their fortified places, kill their young men with the sword, dash their little children to the ground, and rip open their pregnant women." What a loving God, put to tears that women and children will be murdered. Oh, it's because they're his chosen people, but anybody else can have the same happen, and he gives absolutely no fucks about it, sometimes demands it actually. On the topic of Jehovah's everlasting love for children, in Judges, Jephthah burns his daughter alive. A common occurrence in the Bible, it seems, all to appease Jehovah God in a sacrificial offering to gain his favor in killing the Ammonites. Yea, genocide. Isaiah 13 verse 16 reads, "Their infants will be dashed to pieces before their eyes. Their houses will be looted and their wives violated." 2 Kings 15 verse 16 reads, "At that time, Menahem, starting out from Tirzah, attacked Tifsa and everyone in the city and its vicinity because they refused to open their gates. He sacked Tifsa and ripped open all of the pregnant women." Leviticus 20 verse 13 states that any man who has sex with another man is to be put to death, as well as Romans 1 verse 26-32 stating that any who commit an act of homosexuality are also to be put to death via execution. Keeping on track with anything homosexual, let's read Deuteronomy 22 verse 5. It says, and I quote, "A woman must not wear men's clothing, nor a man wear women's clothing, for the Lord your God detests anyone who does this." In the Bib, it is stated that no man shall work on the Sabbath, originally Saturday, but later moved to Sunday as religion evolved, something you probably were unaware of, and hearing that you might think it's optional, but it really isn't. In Numbers 15:32-36, a man is simply collecting some sticks on the Sabbath, and God commands the Israelites to fucking stone him to death just for picking up a few sticks. I didn't know where to place this one, but when reading the Bible you'll come across some strange things. Jehovah God, as one of his punishments, forced a man to eat literal shit. No, I am not joking. This is actually in the Bible. Ezekiel 4:1-12 reads, "Now, son of man, take a block of clay, put it in front of you, and draw the city of Jerusalem on it. Then lay siege to it. Erect siege works against it, build a ramp up to it, set up camps against it, and put battering rams around it. Then take an iron pan, place it as an iron wall between you and the city, and turn your face toward it. It will be under siege, and you shall besiege it. This will be a sign to the people of Israel. Then lie on your left side, and put the sin of the people of Israel upon yourself. You are to bear their sin for the number of days you lie on your side. I have assigned you the same number of days as the years of their sin. So for 390 days, you will bear the sin of the people of Israel. After you have finished this, lie down again, this time on your right side, and bear the sin of the people of Judah. I have assigned you 40 days, a day for each year. Turn your face toward the siege of Jerusalem, and with bared arm prophesy against her. I will tie you up with ropes so that you cannot turn from one side to the other until you have finished the days of your siege. Take wheat and barley, beans and lentils, millet and spelt. Put them in a storage jar and use them to make bread for yourself. You are to eat it during the 390 days you lie on your side. Weigh out 20 shekels of food to eat each day and eat it at set times. Also measure out 1/6 of a hin of water and drink it at set times. Eat the food as you would a loaf of barley bread. Bake it in the sight of the people, using human excrement for fuel. It's also funny how Jehovah God's commandments included not to kill, but there are several instances where men who simply didn't worship or believe in him were put to death simply for that reason alone. Exodus 32 verse 25-29 reads, Moses saw that the people were running wild, and that Aaron had let them get out of control and so become a laughingstock to their enemies. So he stood at the entrance to the camp and said, Whoever is for the Lord, come to me. And all the Levites rallied to him. Then he said to them, This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says, Each man strap a sword to his side. Go back and forth through the camp from one end to the other, each killing his brother and friend and neighbor. The Levites did as Moses commanded, and that day about 3,000 of the people died. Then Moses said, You have been set apart to the Lord today, for you were against your own sons and brothers, and he has blessed you this day. Apparently killing people who are in your own army, which includes your friends, and even your literal family, is the only way to regain the blessing of Jehovah after a failed job. This is the type of shit a dictator would do. But I guess it's no surprise seeing as Jehovah God is indeed a dictator when you boil everything down. Not to mention him killing pagan priests in 2 Kings 23 verse 20, sending snakes made of fucking fire to kill people in Numbers 21:6, killing a man for not impregnating a woman in Genesis 38 verse 9-10, complete genocide in Deuteronomy 2 verse 32-35, where he commands his people to kill even the children, as well as doing the same thing in chapter 3:37. The entire book of Job, Luke 19 verse 27, where now we have Jesus commanding his enemies to be brought before him and murdered in cold blood, and making a deal with a man, only to force him to burn his own daughter to death, and many more examples that quite frankly I don't feel like putting in this comment to make it over an hour in length when reading, so the final one I'll speak on is when Jehovah God in the book of 2 Kings 2 verse 23-25 murdered 42 children with 2 bears simply because they made fun of the proper power for being bald. Complete fucking psychopath. Not much more I can really say here. Going all the way back to Genesis 7 verse 21-23, Jehovah God drowns everybody on earth, including the animals who lack any critical thinking skills of their own to even know of his existence, besides 2 of each kind aboard Noah's Arkansas. That includes the men, the women, and even the children yet again in an agonizing death of which they had no hope left. In 1 Samuel 15 verse 3 God says, "Now go and strike Amalek and devote to destruction all that they have. Do not spare them, but kill both man and woman, child and infant, ox and sheep, camel and donkey." Rather than trying to find a peaceful solution to anything, God resorts once again to the murder of hundreds, if not thousands of people for not obeying his every whim and command. Moving forward to yet another genocide by Jehovah God, Joshua 6 verse 20-21 reads, "When the trumpet sounded, the army shouted, and at the sound of the trumpet, when the men gave a loud shout, the wall collapsed. So everyone charged straight in, and they took the city. They devoted the city to the Lord and destroyed with the sword every living thing in it, men and women, young and old, cattle, sheep and donkeys." In Numbers 31:7-18, God commands his people, the Israelites, to kill all Midianites except for virgins who were to be plundered as spoils of war, so again to be raped and remarried. Wonderful that our God endorsed rape so frequently of women and potentially children during this point in time, and we're all supposed to worship him for it. In Numbers 31:17, he even calls for the execution of male children. Deuteronomy 13 verse 6-10 says, "If your very own brother, or your son or daughter, or the wife you love, or your closest friend secretly entices you, saying, 'Let us go and worship other gods,' gods that neither you nor your ancestors have known, gods of the peoples around you, whether near or far, from one end of the land to the other. Do not yield to them or listen to them. Show them no pity. Do not spare them or shield them. You must certainly put them to death. Your hand must be the first in putting them to death, and then the hands of all the people. Stone them to death, because they try to turn you away from the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery." Deuteronomy continues in 13:18 by stating that troublemakers have arisen among you and have led the people of their town astray, saying, "Let us go and worship other gods, gods you have not known. Then you must inquire, probe, and investigate it thoroughly. And if it is true, and it has been proved that this detestable thing has been done among you, you must certainly put to the sword all who live in that town. You must destroy it completely, both its people and its livestock. You are to gather all the plunder of the town into the middle of the public square and completely burn the town and all its plunder as a whole burnt offering to the Lord your God. That town is to remain a ruin forever, never to be rebuilt, and none of the condemned things are to be found in your hands. Then the Lord will turn from his fierce anger, will show you mercy, and will have compassion on you. He will increase your numbers, as he promised on oath to your ancestors, because you obey the Lord your God by keeping all his commands that I am giving you today and doing what is right in his eyes. So, according to Jehovah God, if you don't worship him, then you are to be murdered in cold blood for having your own system of belief. This is Christianity in its purest form, and while I can accept that most Christians are likely good people, I cannot stomach how, after they read the atrocities Jehovah has done to innocent people for having their own religions and beliefs, and justify it. Let's say God is real. He's a power-hungry megalomaniac who allows for suffering simply because he can. And if you're not grateful for your suffering, he just straight up tortures you with stoning and or burning, then ends your life. There's another account as well I would like to read from the Bible about killing non-believers. That's Chronicles 15:13. All who would not seek the Lord, the God of Israel, were to be put to death, whether small or great, man or woman. This verse here says that not only should you slaughter people who have different beliefs and or religions, but even those who don't believe in God whatsoever or who don't want to convert to worshiping him. Seems reasonable, something Kim Jong-un would probably do, so I support it. Obviously sarcasm here, but I doubt people would be smart enough to understand that. And even Jesus was a fucking cunt at points in the Bible too. Just a quickie, because this comment isn't exactly about Jesus, although I might make one in the future if this one does well enough, which by my standards is probably 5-10 likes. Matthew 15 verse 22-28, and I fucking quote, "A Canaanite woman from that vicinity came to him, crying out, 'Lord, Son of David, have mercy on me. My daughter is demon-possessed and suffering terribly.' Jesus did not answer a word. So his disciples came to him and urged him, 'Send her away, for she keeps crying out after us.' He answered, 'I was sent only to the lost sheep of Israel.' The woman came and knelt before him. 'Lord, help me,' she said. He replied, 'It is not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs.' 'Yes, it is, Lord,' she said. 'Even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table.' Then Jesus said to her, 'Woman, you have great faith. Your request is granted.' And her daughter was healed at that moment. While Jesus did eventually grant the request, he was quick to call her a dog and state he was only to help the people of Israel, because equality, am I right? You would expect for Jehovah God to be consistent with the rules he sets in place and what both he and his people do, so this part is quite strange. In the book of Samuel, because David had an affair, instead of punishing David himself, he made all of his wives prostitutes, which I guess is poetic justice. He fucked a woman, so now they all fuck men. But remember, this was during a time where women having sex with people who weren't their spouse were fucking executed by his own law. He literally sets them up to be killed, so now they suffer for David's actions. Perfect way to show him whose boss make others suffer, not him. That'll show him, especially when much lesser offenses have lead to people being slaughtered by the thousands, forced to eat literal shit, and burn their own daughters alive, because Jehovah God commanded it. This is actually starting to piss myself off. We literally have people who worship this piece of shit. Let's go to Isaiah 13 verse 18 for some wisdom. Surely Jehovah God wouldn't call for the death of even more literal children, right? Right? It reads, "Their bows will strike down the young men. They will have no mercy on infants, nor will they look with compassion on children." Ezekiel 9 verse 6 reads, "Slaughter the old men, the young men and women, the mothers and children, but do not touch anyone who has the mark. Begin at my sanctuary." So they began with the old men who were in front of the temple. You thought these verses were over with? Nope. There are plenty more to go around, such as Hosea 13 verse 16 stating, and I quote, "The people of Samaria must bear their guilt, because they have rebelled against their God. They will fall by the sword. Their little ones will be dashed to the ground, their pregnant women ripped open." Nothing says bearing guilt than a genocide of women and children. Obviously though, Jehovah God has a clear-cut stance on who he kills. You must do something heinous, or not believe in him for some weird reason, but that's about to be disproven rather quickly with 1 Samuel 6 verse 19. But God struck down some of the inhabitants of Beth Shemesh, putting 70 of them to death, because they looked into the ark of the Lord. The people mourned because of the heavy blow the Lord had dealt them. They looked at a fucking ark and were killed because of it. All they did was look, and that was enough for Jehovah God to mercilessly end their lives. What the actual fuck is wrong with our quote-unquote just God? I seriously wonder why I never heard of any of this besides the Book of Job when it came to congregation meetings. Moving on. Something I found out reading Deuteronomy is that if a woman feels your penis or balls without your permission, she's to be put to death. But again, remember, raping a woman gets her as your wife. This entire book is fucking trash. Throw it in the bin. Something else I didn't know where to put it, so I'm placing it here, is that Jehovah God tells people to kill witches. Except for the fact witches don't exist besides the mentally ill Wiccas that run around practicing imaginary magic that never fucking works because magic doesn't exist. But I digress. Another part one didn't know where to put, so I'm putting it here is 2 Kings 6 verse 28-29 where cannibalism is permitted in the Bible. So we have a God who kills people willy-nilly because he feels like it should they not obey his every command and or believe in him. A God who lets women be raped and they're punished by being forced to marry their rapist. A God who murders literal children if they live in a city that doesn't worship him even though they have no choice in the matter. A God who will not let those with any physical and potentially mental ailments worship at churches. A God who will kill you for working on the Sabbath, even if you're simply collecting sticks. Allowing for people to be tormented unrelentingly, such as Job. A God who condones and endorses slavery, unless it's his people, of course, then it's injustice. A God with substitutional atonement, such as with David being the sinner, but his wives paying the price. A God who demands immoral action such as one I've not spoken of, such as making Abraham think he would have to execute his own son, only pulling out at the last moment. And a God who confuses obedience with morality. As is said in the Bible, man cannot save himself, only through faith may it be fulfilled. So whatever you do is meaningless unless your entire earthly life is devoted to worshiping Jehovah God without asking any questions and living through blind obedience. As for a few contradictions, let's start with a glaring issue in the Bible, that being the death of Judas. In Matthew 27 verse 5, Judas hanged himself over guilt and grief of causing the death of Jesus via betrayal of his ever so seductive kiss. Prior to this, he had thrown away his money and lived a life of despair until his final moment. Fast forward to Acts 1 verse 18, however, and he fell headlong with his body bursting open and his intestines falling out of his body after accepting the money happily, not grieving over his friend, and buying farmland with the money he had acquired via his betrayal. Some people try to claim they both connect with the rope breaking, leading to him falling headlong, but it clearly states he died from his hanging in Matthew. Moreover, the accounts of how he got into each situation vary wildly, with one telling of events being a broken man who realized what he had done, and the other a smug and arrogant man who gave absolutely no fucks. He just had the Son of God whom he studied under executed for his own gain. Genesis 22 verse 1 shares the words God tested Abraham, whilst James 1 verse 13 states that God does not tempt anybody, even though the entire story of Abraham itself is God tempting him to murder his own son in cold blood only to pull out at the last moment and reveal it as a test of faith, which is just fucked up in and of itself. Something else I noticed when reading the Holy Book was even the events of Jesus' execution weren't told with the same timeline. In Luke 23 verse 26, Matthew 27 verse 32, and Mark 15 verse 21 it states Simon carried Jesus' cross, but in John 19 verse 17 it says that Jesus carried his own cross. We all know from the book of Mark that Jesus died after his Passover meal, or the Last Supper. It's very famous, but if you account the book of John, Jesus died before the Passover meal ever took place, with the temple curtain tearing after he died in Mark 15 verse 38, but after his death in Luke 23 verse 45-46. Even the final words of Jesus himself are disputed. In John 19 verse 30, Jesus simply says, "It is finished." In Luke 23 verse 46, Jesus says, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." And most hauntingly are his final words in Matthew 27 verse 46, which paints a completely different picture, and I've never heard be said at any church or kingdom hall I've gone to, as he said in his last breaths, "My God, why have you forsaken me?" During his final moments, it is revealed his mother Mary is at the cross in the book of John, but watching from afar in the book of Mark. This one isn't a gotcha, just again an interesting small tidbit I noticed. When Jesus returned via his resurrection in the book of Matthew, the women met with Jesus near the tomb and were instructed to go to Galilee, where Jesus then appeared. But if you take the accounts of Luke and John into play, his appearances after resurrection took place in Jerusalem, with Luke's account not mentioning anything of Jesus in Galilee. Whereas to the credit of consistency, the book of John actually does mention Jesus later appearing in Galilee, such as the book of Matthew. Matthew 1 and Luke 3 list very different genealogies between David and Jesus. They diverge significantly in names and structure. In the book of Matthew, he descends through Solomon, whilst in the book of Luke, he descends through Nathan. Moreover, the teachings of Jesus weren't always consistent. In John 14 verse 27, Jesus says, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you." But in Matthew 10 verse 34, Jesus says, "I did not come to bring peace, but a sword." Jesus also have special privilege to some of his followers such as Zacchaeus, who unlike the other disciples, did not need to give up every possession they had, but only half. Jesus also states there are no exceptions to divorce in Mark 10 verse 11-12, but in Matthew 5 verse 32 gives the exceptional clause of sexual immorality. And finally, for this brief part on Jesus, he says in John 3 verse 16, the most famous Bible verse ever written, that belief grants eternal life. Whilst in Matthew 7 verse 21 he says, "Not everyone who says to me, 'Lord, Lord,' but the one who does the will of my Father," when speaking on eternal life. The very first contradiction to the Bible takes place in the very first 2 chapters, believe it or not. In Genesis 1, animals were created before humans, with man and woman being created together, but Genesis 2 says that man was born first, followed by animals, then finally women. This next contradiction from Genesis could, I admit, simply be details added on for context later on, especially because they're both in Genesis. But in Genesis 6 verse 19-20 it states Noah's ark had 2 animals of every kind, and Genesis 7 verse 2-3 states that there were 7 pairs of clean animals and 2 of unclean animals. I don't know exactly what correlates as clean versus unclean, but it's one that I wholeheartedly admit I just placed in here because I found it to be a little interesting. Staying with Genesis, in 32:30 Jacob says he saw the face of God. In Exodus 33 verse 11 it says the Lord spoke to Moses face to face. But in fairness, God in this form was a burning bush, so take the Exodus example with a grain of salt, whilst in John 1 verse 18, completely contradicting Genesis 32 verse 30, it is said that no one has ever seen God. Moreover, if we stick to Exodus 24 verse 9-10, it explicitly states Moses and the elders saw God, with Exodus 24 describing a visible form. Keeping on the topic of Jehovah God, it is claimed in Malachi 3 verse 6 and Numbers 23:19 that God does not change. However, there are a few notable examples such as Genesis 6 verse 6, where God regretted making humans. Exodus 32 verse 14, where God relented, and Jonah 3 verse 10, where God made the decision to not destroy Nineveh, showing God's absolute hypocrisy. Yet again, in Exodus 20 verse 5, it is said the sins of the father falls upon their children to the 3rd and 4th generation. But in Ezekiel 18 verse 20, it clearly states the son shall not bear the guilt of the father. So which is it? James 2 verse 24 says a person is justified by their works and not through their faith. However, multiple other times in the Bible, including, but not limited to, Ephesians 2 verse 8-9, it directly states that humans are saved by the mercy and grace of God through their faith and devotion to Him, not of anything they do good or bad in their lives. Let's talk about some falsehoods of the Bible, shall we? We all know that the earth orbits around the sun, but in the Bible it's taught that the sun orbits the earth. So much so that in Joshua 10 verse 12-13 it is said that God stopped the sun and even the moon in the sky for an entire day's time. This, however, has some drawbacks with it. Mainly that the sun wouldn't stop in place, the earth would, and everybody would be flung forward at over 1,000 miles per hour. Tsunamis would raise higher than skyscrapers, and there would be dust clouds the sizes of cities careening through the air. Long story short, everybody would die. The oceans would flood the poles, and the equator would probably be a barren wasteland. Anyways, Copernicus developed his own theory on how the solar system worked, placing Earth at the time known more formally as Terra as the 3rd planet orbiting the Sun. The Catholic Church despised this idea because it went against what was taught in the Bible, and so in 1616 they outright prohibited his theory. They were so fucked in the heads that in 1615 Galileo was put on trial. Yes, an actual fucking trial for researching Copernicus' theory. The Catholic Church made him out to be one who hates God, a heretic, etc. by showing him the instruments of torture and stating he would be subject to them if he did not submit and admit he was a heretic, where they then jailed him to a room for the rest of his life. The reality of the fact is that the Earth orbits around the Sun every 365.25 days, spinning on its axis every 23 hours and 56 minutes with a speed around 1,000 miles per hour, and it moves around 67,000 miles per hour around the Sun itself. To stop such a speed immediately would have everything destroyed via inertia. That's just how physics works. The spinning keeps up locked to the ground through gravity. The constant speed of the Earth flying forward, but being caught in a circular orbit is what keeps us from freezing to death. Moreover, with the sun shining on the same part of the planet for an extra 24 hours, there would be some pretty severe heat waves which could cause some health problems within individuals. Rather than a static Earth as the Catholic Church had enforced, and an unmoving one with the sun orbiting it as was stated in the Bible, we have a dynamic Earth of which has gone through multiple eras of its own. We started in the Hadean era, when our planet originated somewhere around 4.5 billion years ago through the gases, dust, and debris colliding together through gravity to form it, alongside multiple protoplanets. During this time, the Earth was but a molten ball floating through space and time, being bombarded with asteroids and meteorites. At this point in time, there was little to no oxygen and very little nitrogen, which mixes with oxygen in the air we breathe, because little known fact, but oxygen on its own is poisonous to our bodies without that filter. Back on track though. This isn't even to mention how the Bible claims the Earth is only by modern-day standards anywhere from 10,000 years old, when we have sufficient geological evidence to prove it's over 4.5 billion years old, with the universe being over 13.7 billion years old. This is important because apparently within the first week of time existing, the Earth was already fully formed by God's miracles, which should place both around the same time frame in terms of age. There are also more parts of the Bible which science has proven to be falsehoods in this regard, such as God creating the Earth before the Sun, when the Sun formed first as a star before the Earth formed as a planet. God creating plants before the Sun was created, of which without the Sun they would all die off rather quickly, and creating humans from simple dust when humans have been proven through DNA and RNA to have evolved over thousands upon thousands of years from early hominins, or homos for short. Something else which makes no sense is how God created light 3 days before the Sun, Moon, or even the other stars in the universe were created. For those wondering how light works, let me explain it to y'all so you can understand the absurdity of these biblical claims. Light, as we know and perceive it, is electromagnetism, or electromagnetic radiation. It has no mass, and due to that constantly travels at the speed of light, which is somewhere around 299,792,458 meters per second. Light works as both a wave and as a particle, with its wavelengths telling our brains how to perceive color dependent on the energy it gives off. For example, short wavelengths often tend to be blue in color, whilst long wavelengths will appear as red. We receive the light through photoreceptors, which travel through our optic nerves into our brains, where the photon interactions are interpreted. How the Sun produces light is through nuclear fusion in its core, converting hydrogen to helium and eventually heavier elements until it hits iron and explodes in a supernova. The Sun every second converts somewhere around 500-600 million tons of hydrogen into helium, with around 4 million tons of that mass being converted into energy that we receive here on Earth as both heat and as light. That light taking anywhere from 10,000 100,000 years to reach the Sun's surface and travel to Earth in around 8 minutes and 20 seconds due to the speed of light and distance from the Sun to the Earth. I could get more into detail, but again, this is about the Bible. Without the Sun, there is no light reaching us, so the very belief that light was upon us properly and consistently before the Sun formed is asinine. The primary source of sustained visible light on Earth is the Sun. Without a star, stable visible light cycles are physically implausible. We also have the firmament separating the waters of the sky, which give us rain from the waters of the Earth. What was believed back in the time of the Bible was essentially a solid dome over a flat Earth with genuine vast quantities of water in the sky, when we know today how cloud formations arise, and more importantly that the Earth is spherical. To get off the topic of the solar system for a short while, let's look at the flood for a moment in Noah's Arkansas. There is no geological layer from the flood. There were millions of species on Earth at the time, so the ark size would not fit even half of them with just one of each animal on board, and there are no records to show global flooding from that time, in any capacity. Genesis 3 also speaks of the talking serpent. To date, no snake has the same complex vocal capabilities that we humans do, and I know later in the Bible it's revealed to be Satan, but that genuinely feels like a quick cop-out later down the line to make Satan out to be hated by the masses even more as the ultimate villain of the Bible. To stick with the very earliest renditions of the Bible as well, we all know the story of the flood, but there is another account with 150 days of water prevailing. Just a fun little tidbit I noticed. To switch over to Jesus for a moment, the adversary of Satan, he first appeared to his disciples in many different locations. In Acts 1 verse 4 and Luke 24 verse 33-49 it was in Jerusalem. In Matthew 28 verse 16-17 and John 21 it was in Galilee. While I can accept perhaps they had met Jesus in the respective places at different times, they were both cited as his first appearance to the disciples. There are also contradictions in Jesus' own bloodline with Joseph, the earthly father of Jesus being the son of Jacob in Matthew 1 verse 16, whilst Luke 3 verse 23 lists Joseph as the son of Heli. Moreover, to add to this confusion, between David and Jesus, Matthew lists 27 different generations, while Luke has 42. Numbers were just confusing back then, I guess. I mean, counting to 10 for myself is a task I've only recently been able to accomplish with my small, insignificant human brain. There are also different narratives presented about who went to Jesus' tomb. John 20 verse 1 states that only Mary and Magdalene had went. Matthew 28 verse 1 adds Mary, the mother of James. Mark 16 verse 1 adds Salome. And finally, Luke 24 verse 10 mentions many more had gone. While I can believe that they all wrote after people had gone separately, they were described as going in a group. Off the topic of Jesus, let's speak about David for a moment. In 1 Chronicles 21:5 it is said David's census consisted of over 1 million men in Israel and 470,000 in Judah, while 2 Samuel 24 verse 9 has David's count be 800,000 in Israel and 500,000 in Judah. Those are pretty big numbers to mess up. We also have 2 different accounts on what caused David to sin within the Bible. In 2 Samuel 24 verse 1, it was his anger at Jehovah God that was his decision to take a census, whilst in 1 Chronicles 21 verse 1 it was Satan who incited him. Then we have the temple workers, where in 1 Kings 5 verse 16 it's claimed to have had 3,300 supervisors, but 3,600 supervisors in 2 Chronicles 2 verse 2. This one I can actually see as being a genuine mistake, with the numbers not being as atrocious as those found with David's census. In the Bible there is also a lot of death, and many accounts are retold with completely different outcomes. Take for example the death of Ahaziah, who in 2 Kings 9 verse 27 was shot by Jehu, where he fled to Megiddo and later died as a result of his injuries sustained. But in 2 Chronicles 22 verse 9, he was captured in Samaria and brought to Jehu himself, where he was executed on the spot. The only thing these 2 interpretations have in common is that Jehu did in fact kill Ahaziah. Something not as clear-cut on who killed another is the death of Saul, however. In 1 Samuel 31 verse 4-5 it's stated Saul died when he had fallen on a sword. But earlier in the very next book of the Bible, in 2 Samuel 1 verse 10, it claims an Amalekite claimed to have killed Saul. The only way this is not a contradiction is if the Amalekite had lied about slaying the king. I don't know where to put this, so I'm putting it here. Did you know in the Bible that bats are classified as birds rather than as mammals? It's just an odd thing I noticed, and I wanted to share that with y'all. I also didn't know where to put this. But in the Bible it has a random fucking quote in Mark 4 verse 31 that says mustard seed is the smallest of all seeds. Not only is this factually incorrect, but just as the damaged testicles of earlier has no real reason to be mentioned in the Bible, as it's not extensively important in the grand scheme of the storytelling being told. Anyways, rant over. If you took the time to read this, then good on you. If you have a brain, you'll realize the Bible was written by troubled tribalistic men, and that for centuries the Catholic Church had more power than any other government, and used that to their advantage for their own gain, whilst the people suffered.
Man, it used to be cool to just flip a bird to the system, and now it's trendy to be triggered and pretend you're a victim. It's my race, it's my weight, it's because I'm a Christian. I hate the internet and anyone who has an opinion. And everybody angry if you say white. Okay, fine, pass me the brush and I'll paint my face to the shades right.